Welcome back to Reading the Revolution. Basically, in this channel, what we do is we read these books from these influential liberators and influential people of revolution, of different systems than the ones that we have now. Marxism, capitalism, communism, socialism. And now we're learning about neocolonialism. So that is what we do here. Welcome. Education gives you the power to be mobilized. Boop. Hi. Education gives you the power to be mobilized. If you don't have education, you don't know what you're fighting for, or you don't know how to fight. And you can very easily be a pawn, and if you don't know what system of. So that is the purpose here. We want to educate ourselves so that we are the leaders. The way that I structure the stream is, again, we go through the notes of what we've read up to this point. So at this point, we are already in Chapter 4. So we will be going over everything up until Chapter 4. And I have the notes now. Actually, I haven't put them on Discord yet, but I did put up the Discord channel. And after this stream, I will put in the notes. They're not going to include what we've read today because, of course, I don't know what we're going to read today, but they're going to have everything up until this moment right now. And I think I will be able to upload them daily. I don't think that there's much of a problem there. I update them for myself daily, so that should be relatively easy. So let's go through it. Again, introduction, myself. My name is Marielis. I am a Dominican American living in Norway. And, a little bit more about me that I haven't shared is that the reason that I moved here is because I was so disillusioned by the system in the U.S. And, a lot of things were changing and in the negative and continue to do so even after I've moved away. I've been here for 3 years now. But it's still my home. And I still think that we should be part of the change if there is going to be a change. And this is the little part that I play, which is in educating myself and hopefully educating others. Okay, so let's start with our notes. Okay, so one thing that I'm actually going to do, I was just thinking about it before I started the stream today, is that I'm going to just highlight things like every time I update my notes of the things that I'm going to be basically saying on the next stream when we go over the notes, because you guys can go over the notes on your own later, but these notes are getting so long and we're only on Chapter 4, so we have at least three weeks or 3 or 4 more weeks before we finish based on the tempo that we've had up until this point. So they're only going to get longer. Okay, so our author, Kwame Nkrumah, he was the liberator of the Gold Coast, which is now Ghana. And he was the first prime minister, the first president. He was influenced by some civil rights movements when he was living in New York. He was educated in, New York, in the U.S. and in the States. Many Black rights activists and revolutionaries moved away from their birth country while fighting for the cause. Nothing wrong with fighting from a distance. Yeah, and I think it also gives you a little bit more of safety. And I think that that's also part of it. But yes, disillusionment is one of the reasons. And safety is honestly the other. I don't know what this intro thing says. It's just supposed to say intro. Okay, so the most important thing that we learned in the intro is that neocolonialism is actually worse than imperialism and colonialism because of the lack of responsibility of the colonial powers, because they don't have to report back and they're not living there, so they don't have to face the the violence or the poverty or whatever the case may be. They can just be kind of hands off. And then we went over some of the ways that neocolonialism shows up, and it's in financial agreements, implanted politicians, military pretenses, because mainly it's for security of the resources. Then we jumped into the example of this book. So, of course, we know that many nations and continents are being neocolonialized. And so, but the main focus of this book, we're looking at Africa and how it has affected Africa specifically. So we learned that the population grew astronomically from the time that this book was published until today, but nothing really has changed. Their production capabilities, their water, their power capabilities, nothing has really changed. Things have improved quite small amount, let's say for the water power production, from 5 to 11%. But when you think about this population growth right here, I don't really think that's really considered growth. It isn't. That I don't have to actually be insecure about that point. Let's see the resources. If Africa was able to produce for itself, if everything it was able to if it was able to produce from its own resources for itself, it would be a completely developed continent up until this point. But instead, what it has been doing in the last 100 years is developing Europe and America. So that is why the West is where it is now. Why you have all of your comforts, it's because of this neocolonialist system. And the more the others suffer, the nicer your life is. Let's see. I put here, not a surprise, there are apologists. Yeah, so here we talk a little bit about some of the people that are in the media, professors, leaders, good politicians, whatever the case may be. There's always these apologists of the system that say, if you just worry about, feeding your population, then you can work on industrializing. And Kwame argues that is impossible, because one example again I think this example is one that you're going to hear over and over again, because I might have to say it every single stream, is the one from Nigeria and Ghana. Right here, we saw an illustration of Ghana and Nigeria's growth in production, but decrease in their income. And this is because of cost of managing the bigger lands, the bigger farmlands. So if you don't have the right equipment, you don't have the right insecticides, you don't have the right things that you need to produce in these large farms, then it's going to cost more to produce more. And therefore, for them, in this example in particular, they actually doubled or tripled their production of cocoa, and their income actually decreased, which is, I don't even know how you can be a leader in one of these countries and know that and sleep at night, because that is just embarrassing. And it has to do with a lot of these contracts that they have, because they have to produce more, because they're being the request to produce more. And if they don't, then maybe they won't get something else, because there's always this like extortion kind of relationship. So yeah. And we talked about some of the obstacles to economic progress. And we had several examples, but one of them was the Spain and Portugal. Basically, when they did their imperial works in Africa, they divided this land mass into 19 separate African countries with very small population, giving them the opportunity, the instruction, really the motivation to think for themselves, to worry about their own people, to be this selfish or independent way of managing their countries, and therefore, divide and conquer. If they don't unite with the others, it's easier for them to control. So that's there. We have examples of the French Guinea contract, where France put forth this ridiculously, inconvenience, extortion type contract to a bunch of these of their properties, of their territories. Sorry. And Guinea was like, no, we're not. That's ridiculous. We're not going to accept it. And then, because it was a territory that was colonialized by France, even though they were on their neocolonial phase of the stage, they were like, okay, well then we're going to take absolutely everything from you, and yeah, even the light bulbs. So it's something that I'm just gonna. It's just ridiculous. I'm glad that Kwame wrote it in the book, that he was like, even the light bulbs, because yeah, that is something that I just can't get over. Yes, so some history of treatment and obstacles to development and unity in Africa. We talk about how they can trade territory. Like Portugal was basically a colonial, semi-colonial territory in NATO, and for negotiations between themselves, post or pre-war situations, they would negotiate these countries. Basically, this one is, you can have this one if you let me have this one, or if you don't interfere with me trying to steal this from this other one, or I'm going to go to war with that guy, but don't jump in, because I'll let you have this other thing. So this is basically how the neo-colonial territories are treated. Even though it's not colonialized, it's about power, it's about soft power, but it's also about all of these contracts and all of these ways that they're able to infiltrate the economy. And later on in Chapter 4, we even read how they infiltrate with their humanitarians, people, like the leaders, and just social movements, religious, and all of that, basically trying to invoke dissent within their own people, because they're always, the more conflict that these small nations have, or these territories have, the easier it is to go in and be the savior with these ridiculously inconvenient and one-sided contracts. So they go to war for these neocolonial territories. We have another example there with Libya going from Spanish to Turkish, and French got in there somehow, and then eventually ended with the British after World War II. And they've been in there since. And even when Libya got their independence, the leader that was put in, or that was there, was assassinated because of all of the injustice that was happening to the people of Libya under his leadership, of course. So, and this is one thing that I said that I was going to research a little bit more, and I haven't actually, but I'm going to go into a little bit about Gaddafi, and because every time I hear his name, I'm always thinking, oh, he was such a bad guy, but I don't really know. This is just propaganda, and I know that my brain is rotting from all of this propaganda, so most of ours are. So our job here is to learn the truth. And then we also learned a little bit. I think that these points over here, I'm not going to skip because they're important, about the leaders that are bots, the bootlickers, the one that feel they're defeatists. We can't make it without our colonial mama. And so we need to continue to have these relationships, and the colonial powers tend to like give them a little bit extra pocket money, pocket change, make them part owner of this or that. So they just, they don't uphold the movements of their people. They don't continue to work towards building their countries. They instead basically give in to the status quo. And then we talked about some solutions. So Kwame discusses that the main solution is cooperation, continental cooperation. Economic is what he's pointing out up until this point. Later, he does say, later in the chapter, in the portion that we actually already read last week, it was technically last week, but on Saturday, is that political cooperation is also a thing that is needed. But yeah, so we have trade, production, policy, and then he says one of the things that is a good thing, something you can help sell it, is that even African countries have space to grow when they are not basically enclosed by just their country. Agriculture can be modernized because you're able to kind of use expertise, financial equipment, resources, basically, from some of your other partner African nations. And you can do industry on a larger scale. He warned us on this section about the U.S. And its investments and monopolies, and I promised you that I was going to look into it. Did you just say the leaders that are bots? I didn't say bots, but basically, I think I called them bootlickers. But bots is, yes, they're fucking bots. And I'm pretty sure we still have them now. Those are examples of who they were then. I would love to, and I think I will, dig into who they are now. So we know who are our good guys that are fighting for a unified, we know some of them that are fighting for a unified Africa, and then we know our, fucking holding Africa back guys. And that can give us a little bit of perspective and maybe even direction. But he did warn us about the U.S. investment and monopolies, and I did look this shit up. I'm not going to tell you until I finish my notes. But I am sure you can guess. They will face difficulties, but claim solutions will be found given the will to succeed. Okay. So he's just trying to motivate in this portion of the book to the African countries. We should create a list of the present day leaders who are good, bad, and their impact on Africa as a whole. For sure. I think so. I think I'm going to create a document. That sounds really fun. I'm going to create a document and then we'll have it on our Discord. Where we can maybe even create this together. But yes, we need to do that. That is fun. And maybe we can share it, Let's see how far we get. Let's see what we actually can accomplish let's not get ahead of ourselves. All right. Yes. And then here in the last thing, I don't know why I put this actually in the solutions part, because it's not solution. It just says intra-country trade has only increased from possible 5% to now 16%, which is awful. It's awful. This is actually, you know what? It's not a solution. We're going to separate it. All right. Other developments since the book was published. Okay. So this is where we were trying to see some like silver lining. And so we saw that there is some international common market or whatever, but we already saw the numbers, so I'm still not impressed with the 16%. And then we saw the common passport thing. Oh, I thought I was supposed to look that up. I didn't, actually. Let me just put a little Where's my stars? Yeah, that lets me know I have to look it up. Okay, more solutions. Economic and political unity. And he wrote another book where he talks about that. Africa must unite. National banks run by nations' own resources. So that's like when I read that, I was thinking more of like when you spend what you earn. A lot of us live off of credit. We overextend ourselves, and I was always told, you don't spend what you don't have. So that's kind of like what I think about when he when he says that. Yeah. So they need to finance themselves. More obstacles. Yeah, I love it, right? We have like 2-3 bullet points of solutions because they're, this is what you have to do. It's like, it's simple in the concept, but then you look at all of the obstacles, and we're spending most of our time on obstacles. So decolonialization is what we are sold, but doesn't solve neocolonialism. So this is one thing that we learned, that the West and some of our counterparts, some of our comrades and stuff are going to say, we need to decolonialize. Actually, this is kind of what we're doing here. We need to decolonialize ourselves. But he says that in its face is not the solution, because what we really need to do is neocolonialize international financial monopolies, banking, and industry. This is the stuff that is actually controlling, not the way that we think. It's the way that the banking and industry capitalists are thinking. They promote world peace. They have all of their arguments, but at the end of the day, it's the same thing. Monopoly capitalism is the last stage of capitalism, he says. Neocolonialism was needed to get here. And then the industries that neocolonialism basically is made up of is investment, manufacturing, transport, public utility, chemical, nuclear, and many more. The reason that I stop at public utility, because public utility, this is what you need to have electricity, drinking water, cell phone, internet, all these different things. The international investors control even that in the countries, in the territories. So that to me is, it's outside of what we typically think. We're thinking, these mining, we're thinking oil, but it's much, much more than that. African countries and other territories mostly buy from the same companies that take their resources. So here he talks a little bit about monopolies and how a lot of the resources that they have to, that they need to survive themselves are, they're basically held by the same companies that are extracting. And there's a certain number. And in this book, he actually lists them. And he even sounds frustrated at a point in the book where he's just being like, I keep seeing these names over and over and over again. These same motherfuckers, because they're not just the people that own all of our resources, but they're also all of the people that we have to buy from. So in this is when I stopped last time, where I was just like, yeah, he sounds like he's frustrated in this part of the book. Economic obstacles. When independence comes, countries are typically in bad shape, so they stay connected to their colonial controllers. Fear of extreme conditions. So this is basically, that's just neocolonialism in definition. Right? So they get their independence. We've already talked that that's when colonialism stops. And then they still need them because they're in terrible conditions. They leave them in terrible conditions. So then they go into these terrible agreements. Okay, so growth in production. Western world requires more raw materials cycle. So this is kind of like the Ghana and and a Nigeria example where you have them producing more and more and more because the growth of production is growing and growing, and the manufacturing is growing and growing, and the Western world is developing and developing. So the African countries have to keep, digging and mining and producing these raw materials, even though they cannot industrialize to make it so that they can make more money. So they actually become more and more poor. Africa needs to borrow to buy finished goods. So again, they become more and more poor. So they need to borrow money so that they can buy the things that their people need. And these needs are not just the things that the cell phone and stuff like that, but it's actually also the services that the country needs to even be a country or be even a semi, livable space. So how do you get out of that? That's some seriousness. And this was, again, 1965. Guys, I'm just going to go ahead and just say it. Am I almost there? It gets worse. It gets much worse. This entanglement is much, much worse. I'm just going to skip some of this so I can get to what I want to actually say. Here we talk about the social help and economic domination. So this is kind of how the European leaders and some of these, these religious people, these cultural ambassadors and all this stuff, basically poison the minds of the African individuals, the public, by telling them that their government is not doing enough, that they're not doing it the right way, that their culture is trash, that they're savages, that they're da-da-da-da, that their religion is bad, da-da-da-da. So they keep stripping them not only of their resources, but they also strip them of their own self, of their own culture, of their own spirit, really, of their own leaders, of their own identity, because they're bringing all of these other people saying we should do it the way the West does. And then the thing is that the way the West does it, it has a lot more obstacles for them. So now they have to buy the things that the West has so that they can be like the West, but that stuff costs more money. And, it just keeps them in this disgusting and awful cycle. Let me read this first one. At this time, there are also European leaders saying that it is best for Africa to keep its relationship with its mother country, and Americans saying that it is best for Africa to both work with them and try to help themselves. Yeah, so this is like that double-edged sword where they're just like, you should do this and that, but it's not realistic. It's just confusion. Missionaries going to Africa every year for some reason, basically. More economic obstacles. Intercontinental monopolies, highly diversified, that penetrates countries in many ways. We've kind of already went over some of those examples. Labor exploitation and greed is what motivates them. So, how do we make those guys into good people? Imperialist finance. I'm sure there are good people within them, but because I can't say that, just because this is a trend and this is a system, that they're not good people in there, or maybe some uneducated or miseducated or propagandized as well people, because again, a lot of these are system. They're machines, and people will just jump in and do the thing that everybody expects them to do because of the culture of greed. So that's, yeah. Imperialist and finance. Okay, so now we jumped into the finance aspect of it. The highest stage of capitalism is what he quoted from, he said Lenin wrote, late comers like the US and Germany to the imperialism game create cartels and syndicates. OPEC is one of those, and I am sure that they have many others, which brought them sooner to a higher stage of monopoly. And then here we have examples of what those things are. Mergers, amalgamations, patent agreements, selling arrangements, production quotas, price fix. So they just meet with each other and make up these rules, and then they go out and, make all this money because they have control over, basically control over how things work so that it benefits them. The Western world go into war for control. And then here we have some examples. We already know, what has happened in history. But Kwame argues that a lot of this stuff is really about imperialism and about capitalism versus socialism. The Germany, of course, we know that it's became fascist. But here they're saying that it was to combat socialism, and some would argue communism. And to prop up capitalism, they became fascist. Imperialism is in a to-the-death trial for survival. So this is where, they will do whatever they can to basically squash systems that take away from the imperialist extraction system. So if you take your country, your people, your economy, your resources out of the system by deciding you're going to have a different system, you're going to have a socialist or a communist system, then you're a threat to them because that is contagious and you basically are taking out your country from the capitalistic world where you have these people making all this money and you don't mess with their money. Here we also learn that they will, that they did do the same thing to their own people. So their own people suffer during some of this stuff. We suffer. We see it in the United States where we don't have basic needs. We don't have free healthcare for all. We have a bunch of homeless people. We're the richest country in the world. We have people that have to that don't have 3 meals a day. We have we have people working like 2-3 jobs to survive and still get like eviction notices because they're still not making enough to just rent and eat. And so every now and then they have to throw crumbs at their people so that they can, appease them or pacify them, like I wrote here. And here you see an example is like after World War II, where you had trade unions and, obviously they give scraps to political leaders. They do that even up to this day with all of our political leaders, honestly, in the U.S. What else? What the powerful trusts were unable to achieve by peaceful competition, they embroiled their countries into military action to achieve for them. Okay, so this is what Clausewitz said. He quoted, basically saying that they will fight to keep this system. Okay. When socialist countries form, they remove their raw materials. Yeah, we went over that. Yes, we went over this. Okay, so we're getting to the end. Oil control is another motivator to prevent the growth of socialism. You can't control what you don't own. And so that is a big goal of the capitalists, is to own all of the oil. We can see it now with the U.S. and basically all of the things that they're doing currently to achieve this. I'm not sure how successful it will be at the end, but it is what they're trying to do, or what they have been trying to do. And then Nkrumah called some of the jobs that the West has parasitic. I found this quite interesting because I'm in marketing. So my particular job is parasitic, according to him. And I can understand where he's coming from with this, because basically what he's saying is that your job is basically just to market for consumption, which is true. You're not marketing. There is no marketing for, you're marketing for profits. I'm sorry, I messed that one up. You're marketing for profit, not consumption, because you don't need to market for consumption. If people need food, they are going to buy food. If people need a place to live, they're going to buy a place to live or rent a place to live. But we do the job of trying to get you to buy what you do not need. That's a different thing. Yeah, I didn't say it last time when I read it, but like that is why I kind of like stopped there. I was like, shit. Yes, my job. It's part of the reason that I'm doing this, right? Because I want to be fulfilled internally. Okay, in 1965, there were 237 foreign companies in Africa. This was when he published the book. This is when he was complaining about the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Morgans, basically owning most of the oil industry, right? He was complaining about it. He had a whole section where he was just like, the same name, this name, this name, and he was listing them all, and he was getting so frustrated. And they only had 237 foreign companies, and the U.S. was only starting to invest in Africa at the time. I know that you see where I'm getting at because you can literally read the notes, but I need to kind of like, animate it because it is insane. He was that serious about it then, and today there are thousands of companies in Africa. I mean, that's like 1,000,000% increase. I don't even know how to do that math. And the American financial capital started growing when he published it, to owning parts of European banks. And he was like, you have to be careful about them because they're going to take over. Yeah, so you see here, this is where we left off. The U.S. today is the number one investor in Africa, mainly in mining and extracting and in information and communication tech services. So basically everything people need to be able to be a part of society, we provide to them. So that is where we left off. Good stuff. Drink some water. Okay. So let me catch my breath and we will watch an Instagram video. I actually haven't seen any of these, I don't think. So we will be reacting to them together. Again, I don't even know if these really apply, so we'll see. If they don't apply, I won't let them play all the way.
The third world is not poor. You don't go to poor countries to make money. There are very few poor countries in this world. Most countries are rich. The Philippines are rich. Brazil is rich. Mexico is rich. Chile is rich. Only the people are poor. But there's billions to be made there, to be carved out and to be taken. There's been billions for 400 years. The capitalist European and North American powers have carved out and taken the timber, the flax, the hemp, the cocoa, the rum, the tin, the copper, the iron, the rubber, the bauxite, the slaves, and the cheap labor. They have taken out of these countries. These countries are not underdeveloped, they're overexploited.
Okay, that was a good one. Okay. No notes. That video was great. Said exactly what we've been talking about. Oh, not the notes. This is exactly what we've been talking about. Okay, so we left off on the Americans. And we had somebody saying something. Let me just read the last section so we know what he says. So last sentence here. This financial dependency upon American has been put... Actually, I'm not showing it to you. This financial dependency upon American has been put by Lord Bierstead, chairman of M. Samuel and Company, at the 1963 annual meeting, when he reported the 17% acquisition of the company's shares by the Morgan Group. We will not be the first merchant bank to have part of its capital owned by American interests. No, they were not. This piteous statement is a public confession of Europe's subservience to American financial monopoly, a monopoly expressed in the strategic and political alliance that bind European capitalism to American capitalism. European statesmen are deeply conscious of their inferior standing, but in the main feel there is little they can do to adjust the position. Resentment, however, there is, and in France, it has expressed itself in General de Gaulle's stand on an individual France nuclear striking force. In his overtures to Adenauer, former German chancellor, in his attempts to exclude Great Britain from the common market as long arm of the United States, and more recently in the overtures of China and his tour in Latin America. All these are efforts to arrest America's dominance of Europe and to exert French independence action on the international front. Such attempts, however, have little chance of success, and they did not succeed, we can now say in the future. Nor can they make but a passing impression upon the world scene. They are in reality expressions of the deep competitive conflicts within capitalist imperialism, which exists below the surface, federations and alliances, conflicts rooted in the unequal development of the contestants, in the unequal development of capitalism. Britain, as the forerunner of the Industrial Revolution, became the workshop of the world, the carrier of the world's goods, the foremost thruster for imperialist control from the city of London. Her decline set in with the upsurge of the younger, more vigorous capitalist state of Germany and America. The two world wars were a test of their strength against the older established capitalist countries and against each other. Here he's talking how Germany has gained so much strength. I thought they were, after World War II, they were in bad shape. So I guess they've recovered by 1965. The United States came out triumphant both times. Still, the city of London is only slowly giving a way to Wall Street as a symbol of world money power. It hopes to resuscitate itself by spreading into European common market, even though it must do so in alliance with and subordination to American financial monopoly. That is an interesting statement, even for its own country. Surplus capital in France was more heavily invested in the less advanced countries of Europe, Russia, Poland, Hungary, and Romania, than that of either Britain or Germany, although they too had large investments in the same European heavy industries, armaments, mines, and oil fields. Everybody, however, turned to the primary producing countries of the world, alienated some as outright colonies under the political rule, subserving and exploiting others as spheres of investment on a semi-colonial pattern. So basically kind of doing the same to each other, the smaller countries, not necessarily in size. Less powerful is better. Because of their late start, German and American capitalism pressed forward with the amalgamation of industrial combines and the monopoly of finance capital more hurriedly than did their Britain and French, whose whose supremacy on the colonial plane assured their hegemony, interrelated at several points, even while competitive, on the international financial level. I found out what is the word? Amalgamation of industrial combines. Yeah, so I didn't really know what that meant, but that's kind of like a syndicate or like what is it? Some type of like group of companies, kind of like OPEC. Yeah. So just in case you didn't know, because I didn't know, honestly. German financial monopoly took a beating in the defeat 1918 when the colonial world was redivided, and again in 1945. American capitalism, on the other hand, owning to geographical and territorial advantages, the last inherent in its political unions, continued to make rapid strides and was the real victor of both world wars. Expansions of American financial industrial monopoly, however, was not confined to Europe. The balance of Western financial power began to tilt towards Asia and Africa, a process that was then speeded up since the end of the Second World War, with the breakdown of colonial rule. Okay, so they picked up the pieces. The many consortia which are being established in the majority of the new states resolved largely about the same financial and industrial groups that have rooted themselves firmly since the interception of colonial rule. Such changes as there are correspond with the changes of influence and have occurred within the groups themselves. The dominating influence is held by the ubiquitous American formation of Morgan and the Rockefellers, with their British and European associations following behind. Dying colonialism is reviving in the international coalitions of neocolonialism. These coalitions of competing organisms reflect the global character that financial monopoly has attained under the dominance of the most powerful imperialism, that of America. They are also a sign of the struggle for survival of the older imperialism against the fierce question of the more powerful aggressiveness of American imperialism, whose vaster production force is driving it outwards more and more. Okay, so I'm not exactly sure why he warned us of American. Maybe he was warning Africa of American. I need to remember that. Because it seems that America was already kind of getting its grips on everything, but then maybe Africa still had a chance. I mean, yeah, going from 237 companies, not just American in investment, but all of the colonial world, 2000s, yeah, maybe they should have heeded the warning somehow, but... Anyways, attempts are made to sweeten the well-known aims of rapidly disintegrating political colonialism. The maintenance of less developed areas of the world as the provides of cheap raw material, spheres of investment, and markets for expensive finished goods and services. The finished goods and services, now that the populations of the new nations are asserting demands for a rising standard of life, are taking on a different character and overspilling into categories formerly neglected: land clearing equipment, hydroelectrical projects, road construction, housing, schools, hospitals, harbors, airports, and all the ancillary and supplementary service they call for, are providing new fields of capital investment and profit for financial monopoly. Both are home and abroad. They are also keeping in handsomely paid employment a large army of so-called expert, technical, and professional people, not always of the highest caliber. That's funny. That's funny. He's basically, saying they're investing in all of these things that countries need to be countries, but they're sending us their dum-dums. And they're probably paying them handsomely. New sources of extractive and agricultural commodities are also extracting large capital investment sums. former dependence upon domestic sources of many minerals in the metropolitan countries is giving place to their importation from abroad. Miners in the copper and iron ore producing regions of the United States, for example, are being thrown out of work not only because of automation, but also because bigger profits are being obtained from the greatly steeped up mining of base minerals in Africa and Asia. In some places, their semi-processing also offers greater margins that can be got in the areas of more expansive labor. Puerto Rico and other Latin American countries that offer cheap labor are fast becoming centers of manufactured goods, consumer goods, frequently processed from imported raw materials and sent to the United States to compete with American-produced commodities at only slightly reduced or the same prices. This gives greater profits still to finance capital. So, so sometimes the Americans are told that, immigrants are taking our jobs. It's not only immigrants, it's just like other countries in general. Well, actually, we do know that. But, the capitalists are never going to give up the advantage. So it doesn't really matter. The intricate process of balancing returns from domestic investment against the outflow of capital into more profitable foreign investment is creating serious rifts in the internal economic position of every Western capitalist country. This is felt particularly in the balance of payments position. Even the United States, whose reserves of gold and foreign exchange were so vast that they have carried her through a growing outward current over a long period, has now reached the stage when, like her less fortunate European counterparts, she is herself entering upon an adverse balance of payment crisis. Yeah, I think this is around the time that we moved to the petrodollar. So maybe this is something I'm going to look up to see around what time it was that we switched. Despite the rise of national production and increased productivity, the problems of agriculture, even in such rapidly rising economies as Western Germany, Italy, and France, bedevil the economic situation. In America, the farming smallholder still lives close to and even below the poverty line, while the extensive mechanized farms of banker finance companies are spoon-fed by a banker's government. Guaranteed prices for produce that goes into government-paid and government-built storages make large-scale farming in the United States highly profitable to finance capital, which passes on to the government the burdensome problems of what to do with unsold surpluses resulting from high prices. What to do with food? Mechanized. You said it. Oh, thanks. Yeah. What do you do? What can we do with our surpluses? The need of further outlets for the products of agriculture, as well as the industrial and commercial complexes that are coming under increasing electronic control and hence acquiring a greater increased potential, is forcing Western capitalism, particularly American capitalism, into greater and more intensive involvement in highly industrialized foreign countries. The recent chicken farce played out against the background of de Gaulle's anti-American policy, which led Franco-German opposition to a continuation of cheaper American poultry importation into Europe, is just one of the lighter examples of the fierce competition going on to upload the output of bank finance vigorously mechanized mass production. It highlighted for a moment the intrinsically paradoxical nature of the European market as the monopolistic organism putting up a strong resistance to a dominant competitive monopoly. The competitive tug of war is exemplified in the retaliative higher tariffs that have now been put upon French and German small cars imported into the United States, which have lost their main advantage over the home-produced article in the consequent higher prices. So, I mean, basically what he's saying is that they're basically competing with themselves on how to extort, or basically, I keep trying to take back the word extort, but basically how to, take over as much of the economic or as much of the world market as possible. So it's this like tug of war of like, I'm going to take over more than you. And they just, make policies and price fix and all these things so that they can, be the one that owns more of the market, even making it difficult for each other. So like, in other words, they don't like each other either. They're yes, we have it bad in Africa and we have our own problems, but they don't actually like each other either. This is how greedy they are. They don't even like each other. Facts and figures prove that trade and investment between the highly industrialized countries are outpacing those with the less developed regions. They effectively support the case that imperialism is not confined to the primary producing sectors of the world. However, the salient fact is that the profit rate from the exploitation of the less developed areas is greater than that received from the more industrialized countries. In the latter, the competition between the monopolies is fiercest and domestic interests, even those which are linked with international finance monopoly, all the time offer the stoutest resistance to the invading ones. Yet, and this is precisely due to their imperialist character, the dominating world financial groups are able to make their constant incursions into the national monopolies and so deepen their hegemony over larger and larger parts of the globe. Yeah, so basically a continuation of that same point. How much easier then it is for imperialist finance to edge its way more and more into the developing countries where colonial rule has broken or is breaking down, under the necessity of seeking greater and greater capital sums for geological explorations and the opening up of new fields of extraction materials. International finance was called to the aid of the national finance of respective imperialist countries. This process was stimulated by the fact that the national financial monopolies had already proceeded to the stage of international alliance with the onset of imperialism, a process that has manifolded, quickened in the present epoch of rising nationalism and socialism. Thus, at this point, present time, all the instruments and mechanics of international imperialism expressed in monopoly coalition are brought to bear in a general descent upon the new and needy countries. I think I stopped too much there to understand what I just read. So I'm going to read it one more time. How much easier then it is for imperialist finance to edge its way more and more into the developing countries where the colonial rule has broken or is breaking down under the necessity of seeking greater and greater capital sums for geological explorations and the opening up of new fields of extraction materials. International finance was called to the aid of national finance of the respective imperialist countries. Okay. This process was stimulated by the fact that the national financial monopolies had already proceeded to the stage of international alliance with the onset of imperialism, a process that has manifoldly quickened in the present, I still don't know how to pronounce that, epoch of rising nationalism and socialism. Okay, so we have rising nationalism and socialism because of this extractive process. Thus, at this present time, all the instruments and mechanics of international imperialism expressed in monopoly coalitions are brought to the bear in a general descent upon new and needy countries. Okay. This new wave of predatory invasion of former colonies operates behind the international character of the agencies employed: financial and industrial consortia, assistance organization, financial aid bodies, and the like. Friendly cooperation is offered in the educational, cultural, and social domains aimed at subverting the desirable patterns of indigenous progress to the imperialist objectives of the financial monopolies. That is interesting. That is so interesting. So aid is provided. And basically, the goal is aid from educational, cultural, and social is provided to subvert the desirable patterns of indigenous progress. Interesting. These are the latest methods of holding back the real development of the new countries. These are the paraphernalia of neocolonialism, superficially proffering aid and guidance, subterraneously, benefiting the interest owners and their countries in old and new ways. Okay, so basically they're infiltrating, like we said earlier, the culture, the social domains, the education. This is why even when you look at the African people, you see that they're also educated in kind of like the same system that the West that we were educated in. We're taught all of the same things. We're taught about the same great leaders, the same great inventors, the same great, basically we're taught the same things. So we're all whitewashed, even though they're in Africa and we think, maybe they have a closer connection to their heritage. No, because there was a system in place there to educate them the way that we're educated. Everybody's whitewashed. Doesn't matter where you are. Everybody's is propagandized. All of our education systems are the same. They also don't know who are their great inventors, who were their great kings, their great leaders. They also don't know about their heritage, and they're losing their culture. Yeah, international aid projects hurt Africa more than it could possibly help. Yeah. Okay, there are several definitions of aid, as B. Chango Machio in his Aid and Neocolonialism has pointed out. Let's see what he says. The definition varies with different blocs. Thus, the UN has its own definition. The imperialist camp has its own. So has the socialist camp. And probably the non-aligned camp might also have one. But generally speaking, there are two main definitions, one by the UN and another as understood by the so-called donor countries. According to the UN, economic aid consists only of outright grants and long-term lending for non-military purposes by government and international organizations. But the so-called aid-giving countries include in the term aid private capital investment and extort credits, even for relatively short periods, as well as loans for military purposes. So this is what we were talking about. The aid always has strings attached, just like we saw with the aid program that the U.S. Sends to a bunch of the African countries. I think we talked about last time. where I think it was Zimbabwe was like, no, thank you. We don't want part of that. Or at least they declined it, but like there's been a little bit of back and forth, and then the U.S. was like, well, if you don't take it, then we don't assist, we don't give medical assistance to your people. And I think the contract included like assistance to for AIDS and HIV prevention, or the spreading and basically the medicines to keep people alive. And so this is a decision, a really, really hard decision that countries have to make. Many of them accepted it. And also, I think in that contract, it includes where they have to provide the American government all of their people's personal, like, medical information. So, yeah. And I imagine it probably has something to do with also testing drugs. You know how it is. I mean, I wouldn't put it past that. There's reasons why Zimbabwe decided that they were not going to accept it. I'm not exactly sure. I think it's still like in conversation, but this is what they do. As Professor Benham in Economic Aid to Underdeveloped Countries remarks, it is pleasant to feel that you are helping your neighbors and at the same time increasing your own profits. Before the decline of colonialism, what today is known as aid was simply foreign investment. Yeah, they just changed the name. It's aid. It's aid in appearance only. It's aid in propaganda only. Okay, we're in chapter 5. Let's take another break. All right, let's take a really short one and watch another video. Okay, yeah, that's where we left off. Did we like it? Yes. Let's skip that one. Let's go with this one.
African governments are finally speaking out about what's happening in South Africa and the steps that they plan to take in order to protect their citizens. I've done a deep dive. It's over on my YouTube. Make sure you go check it out. The link is in my bio. It's important.
If you do not follow this girl, you have to. She is, I don't know much about her, but every single clip that she does is a solution. She's just always spitting out some great solutions, some great ways that Africa can improve itself, and she even basically like says the details of what the contracts should have. So I'm not exactly sure if she's a lawyer or what she is, but you should follow her.
Important for us to understand that this moment is a fork in the road. We can either unite as a continent or fragment. Here's what you need to see, right? South Africa's response has been, there's no xenophobia, straight denial. The kind of denial that sounds like the exact positioning that colonizers would have taken, right? They would deny material extraction and reframe it as inevitability. We're not exploiting you, we're developing you. Your resources are not being stolen, they're being developed. And now, a Black African state is using that same playbook against other Black African migrants. Deny the violence, reframe it, shift responsibility. And honestly, guys, I can't understand why we are not seeing the pattern. Like, they literally wrote this down. They put it in books, man. They put it in books. They documented the strategy of divide and conquer, and we're still ignoring it. Seriously, guys, colonial powers didn't just take land. What they did was split people, families, and trade routes. They split communities that had lived together for generations, tribes. And now we're watching that same playbook happen across the continent right now with what is happening in South Africa. When will we learn? Anyway, let me calm down. Go check out the full breakdown on my YouTube. As always, the data sources will be in my captions. So it will be fact-based only. Click the link in my bio to my YouTube. Make sure you hit repost. Make sure everybody is aware of this. And if you love my content, become a paid supporter. Honestly, head over to my profile and click that subscribe button. Love you guys.
Yeah, I really like her. Very, very smart. And yeah, I can see her frustration. Most of the times she has solutions. This time she had frustration. But it's completely understandable. I think that's basically what we expressed in this channel is a lot of frustration. Hopefully, we'll get to a point where we feel something else. We shall see. Monopoly, capitalism, and the American dollar. The end of empire has been accompanied by a flourishing of other means of subjugation. The British Empire has become the Commonwealth, but the proceeds from the exploitation of British imperialism are increasing. Profits of British tin companies have ranged as high as 400%. I imagine that it's probably more now. The latest dividends of British Diamond shareholders are close to 350%. Yes, actually, let me see. Hold on. Let's go to her real quick. Charmaine Sports. Charmaine's Post. Charmaine's Post. So you're close, you just need an S after the E, after her name. Okay. On one occasion, Mr. Nehru declared that British profits from independent India had more than doubled, and British capital investment in his country rose from RS, I imagine that's the money, 2,065 in 1948 to 4,460 in 1960. So doubled, basically. Total British investment in Africa have soared to 6,500 million. Oh, those are millions. Okay. The French to about 7,000 million, and American to 1.1 million. A recent survey made plain the plunder of British monopolies. I mean, we already know that now the Americas have the most investment and the most monopolies even. A recent survey made plain the plunder of British monopolies. It listed 9 out of 20 of Britain's biggest monopolies as direct colonial exploiting companies. And then we have the names there. Shell, British Petroleum, British American Tobacco, Imperial Tobacco, Burma Oil, Nanga Copper, Rokana Corporation, Rhodesian Mines, and British South Africa, 5 of which are directly engaged in chiseling away Africa's natural resources. The others are busily increasing their trading. Their total of 221 million net profits was over half the combined net profit of the top 20 monopolies. It's definitely more than that at this point. Incredibly, the list leaves out 2 of the world's greatest combines, those states within a state, Unilever and Imperial Chemical Industries, whose operations are based heavily in their overseas exploitations. The United Africa Company leads for Unilever in Africa, about a third of ICI, and its subsidiary operate overseas. Okay. Yeah. So a lot of these numbers, after we saw the summary in the beginning of the stream today, we already know that everything is so much worse than it was before. We saw the population basically blossom, boom, whatever in Africa. We can't even say that it doubled. It was probably a multiple five times. It grew 5 times what it was before, or more than that, actually. So, and nothing changed in production. So you know that they're getting everything from the outside, and these monopolies are the one managing all of that stuff and owning all of it. Anyways, Sir Alec Douglas Home, former Prime Minister of Britain's Tory government, in a speech made on March 20th, 1964, professed himself ignorant of the meaning of neocolonialism. While Sir Alec was talking, Britain was engaged in what his press was busy describing as major crisis areas all over the world, putting down troubles inspired and perpetrated by neocolonialism. Aden in southern Arabia against Yemen, Borneo and Sarawak against Indonesia, British Guinea, maintaining law and order in Kenya, Tanganyika, Uganda for the recently independent governments. Is this the end of imperialism? Not according to The Economist, mouthpiece of Britain's business interests, which felt compelled to comment. Military bases, routes to the east, frontier, skirmishing, putting down mutinies, all this has a 19th century ring quite naturally disturbing to those who had hoped that the end of colonialism meant the end of military involvement east of Suez. The nobly truth of the matter turns out to be that for the moment, Britain has as many military commitments in that area as it ever had before. Colonies were replaced by Commonwealth. Economist 23, May 1964. Yeah, they still to this day play dumb. I think that's one of the warning signs. As soon as you see a leader, a politician, anybody with some type of distinguished, influence, say that they don't know what neocolonialism is. They don't know what these extraction things are. They don't think that they know of anything. They kind of play dumb. Just know that they are probably doing some crazy ass shit in the background because those are the people that always play dumb. Those are the people that always play dumb. They always do that so that we can. It's always the loudest ones denying the ones that are doing the thing. You see that every time you have somebody admit that there is a problem, you know that they're probably not doing anything, because as soon as you admit that there's something wrong, that's when you have to take action to fix the things, right? But if you don't admit to it, then there's nothing to fix. And that's exactly what is the playbook. You basically, don't admit to knowing, don't admit to understanding, play dumb so that, you don't have to fix anything. Because why would you fix anything if you're the one that's causing all of the, extortion, all of the mini wars, all of the, the poverty and the hunger and the deaths? If you're the one that's responsible for all those, then playing dumb is the right, that's the right game plan. So yeah, and you see it now. I mean, you see it with our government in the United States. We're always denying shit. And then you look a little bit deeper and you realize this is what they're doing. The intention is to hold back the progress of the developing countries where circumstances favor the establishment of ventures of a more than token industrial character. The aims is to see that they are made haltingly. The overriding objective is to induce a merely fractional increase in the industrial scope of the new nations in order that they may continue to provide the sinews of imperialism's greater concentration of forces for the final tussle of strength within itself and against socialism. And I think that this is part of that power thing. That's not always about extraction. It's sometimes just about having the bases, having the people or the land so that you can have power over your Western enemies. What is remarkable is that the major part of less developed world, and here we must include the USSR, chose and is choosing the socialist road to national progress. There are, in addition, countries like India where the political system, though patterned on the bourgeois democracies of capitalism, nevertheless proclaims socialism as the socio-economic objective. The nations that have reached their present peaks by passing through the various stages of capitalism cling desperately to the system that has brought them to the heights of imperialism. Each perched perilously on a narrow summit must put up a constant battle to guard its own pinnacle. Greater intensity is infused into the struggle by the resurgence of rivals, of whom Germany and Japan are the worst virile. Both of them have benefited from strong injections of American capital, and U.S. monopolies are drawing off considerable profits from the running that is being made by these two countries in world competition, pointing to the contradictions among the interests involved. Competing against American imperialism, German and Japanese monopolies are frequently in alliance with their USA opposites, who often put them forward in imperialism general offensive against Africa, where open United States private investment might be regarded with more suspicion than others. That's an interesting statement. So the U.S. is seen as more suspicious, so they put forth German and Japanese. Let's read that again. Competing against American imperialism, German and Japanese monopolies are frequently in alliance with their USA opposites, who often put them forward in imperialism general offensive against Africa, where open United States private investment might be regarded with more suspicion than others. Yeah, that's exactly what it was saying. Okay. Germany, moreover, is now second to the U.S. in the scale of so-called assistance to the developing countries, so-called assistance. Since capitalism is the embodiment of the philosophy of self-interest, the ostensible allies of America's monopolists must use the position of strength into which they are being thrust to promote their own growth. I think that the Germans are, I think that Germany has like the most US bases of any other country in the world. I'm going to have to look it up, but I think that they do. I think that they have, like Trump the other day was like, we're going to pull out 5,000 troops from Germany. And I think they have like 100,000. So I don't know. I'm going to look it up later, but they have a lot, and I'll bring it to you next time, or you can look it up later. I'll show you her name later, so you can make sure that I didn't mess it up, Big Bunny. Okay, this struggle for ascendancy among the imperialism is continuous and involves a constant search for renewal of this sinus of strength. Mm-hmm. Alongside the battle for imperialist supremacy, there wages the fight against the ideological camp of socialism, into which the warring imperialists make an all-out effort to trail the developing countries as their appendages. In this way, the anti-communist campaign is used to further imperialist aims. Leaders of monopoly capitalism everywhere built up in the public mind an image of the system in socio-cultural terms by which they transform it into an idealized, harmonious civilization that must be cherished at all costs. They harp upon a way of life that may be altered only to its detriment, and stress is continuity as a major principle in the fight against communism. When Harold Macmillan, as Prime Minister of Britain, told the South African Parliament that what is now on trial is much more than our military strength or our diplomatic and administrative skill. It is our way of life. He epitomized the metaphysical transformation of economic impulses into a social philosophy. This in spite of his reference to winds of change blowing across Africa. He echoed the several statements of the West, any of whom could have made the statement, and indeed have at different times and in almost identical words. The great issue in this second half of the 20th century is whether the uncommitted people of Asia and Africa will swing to the east or to the west. All the powerful imperialist nations are decided that the new states shall develop along the capitalist path. The provisioners of imperialism's vital needs, the source of its super profits, national liberation, and the obvious advantages of socialist development for nations evolving out of a colonialist domination and without the capital means for making the development. A major factors determining imperialist strategy towards these nations in both the interests of its internal struggle and in the fight against socialism. So they are terrified of socialism. They are so scared of it that they are basically, at that time, they were basically saying, Africa and Asia are either going to go in our direction or they're going to go in the other direction, in the West. And I'm assuming that what he means is in the imperialist capitalistic way or in the communist socialist way. So, and then, they paint this picture, especially for us. We've been educated on it growing up that the capitalist way is the best way. We paint the picture that is just so great, and the communists, we should be afraid of them because this system is so bad, and blah blah blah. But in the background, we should always know that it's really always has and always will be about money and extraction. U.S. military bases: Japan 14, Philippines 9, South Korea 8, Germany 6. All right. Could you search how many actual soldiers are in each one of those bases or countries? Because I'm interested to know where I got this crazy number from. Still a lot. 6 is still a lot, but it's definitely way less than hundreds. Yeah. Doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound right. 6 doesn't sound right. All right. So I'll have to look up to see what the hell I was confusing with, because I'm still so convinced that it's not 6. But maybe it is. Maybe I was just looking at something else. Okay. All countries, even the most deeply involved in monopoly imperialism, have a state sector. Indeed, state involvement in private economy has become an essential part of its process. It should cause no surprise, therefore, that developing countries, particularly in view of the small accumulation of local private capital, are obliged to centralize their economies. The size of the state sector and its planned expansion, however, must depend on the economic system which is chosen, capitalist or socialism. The aim of the imperialist power in the application of their aid programs is to turn the state sector into an appendage of private capital in view of the process that has been evolved in the imperialist countries. It would be surprising if this were not so. The declared basis policy of the Agency for International Development, formerly International Cooperation Administration, is to employ United States assistance to aid receiving countries in such a way as will encourage the development of the private sectors of their economies. Thus, ICA will normally not be prepared to finance publicly owned industrial and extractive enterprises, although it is realized that there may be exceptions. Okay. So they're leaving the publicly owned stuff alone, which there should be more of. That's a pretty strong statement, actually. I'm not sure that's the right way. Okay. Development in the new countries along non-capitalist lines must be frustrated in the interest of Western imperialism. A series of articles which appeared in the London Times in April 1964 outlines the pattern and made no secret of his reasons. The two great objects of Britain's foreign policy must be to prevent the non-communist world from being penetrated by communism, and secondly, to prevent her own access to trade and invest in any part of the world being barred or limited. Naturally enough, as the articles conclude, both these objects lead straight into neocolonial issue, the struggle for influence, commercial and political, over the non-communist countries outside Europe and North America. Thus, succinctly does the writer in the Times expose the true character of the ideological struggle between monopolies, leading the ideological struggle because she leads the inter-imperialist struggle. Is the USA as the world's leading imperialist power, America lays successor claim to the so-called vacua, which the retiring colonial powers are said to leave behind as they give way to nationalist governments. Vietnam and Congo are very obvious symbols of this policy of rapid neocolonialism. They are also examples of bitter antagonism between America and other imperialism. According to France Observateur, issue 4 June 1964, the darkest accusations are made by the U.S. against French business circles operating in South Vietnam. American experts in Asia affairs assert that French planters are not content with paying their mites to the South Vietnam National Liberation Front. They will even lend assistance and hide the guerrillas pursued to the government's army. Yep, that sounds just about right. They laid assistance to those that oppose the government, is what I understood there. They will even lend assistance and hide the guerrillas pursued by the government's army. Yeah, just because they don't want to pay taxes, I imagine. They don't want to pay to the government. Yeah, okay, no surprise. In spite of its policy of open aggression in many parts of the globe, the United States frequently poses as the anti-colonial power in the condemnation of Britain imperialism. That's so funny. The pose is thin, and the mask continually falls, even often over critical anti-colonialist revolutions pressed by the Afro-Asian and socialist majority in the United Nations. When the United States and Britain find themselves alone, or only with France, Portugal, South Africa, and Australia voting against or abstaining, British colonial policy and neo-colonialist rivalries. Palm Dut International Fair, Moscow, 1964. In the last 9 years, American investment on this continent have trebled, growing at a faster rate than in any other area. In 1961 alone, American monopolies profited by some 11.2 million, in which they took out of Africa. And it's much, 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 much more and worse. Let's see. It cut off a little bit. The United States Army has over 40 million installations in Germany, 2 of which are scheduled to close on 30th April 2026. President Donald Trump, I can read from here now. President Donald Trump again raised the possibility of reducing the approximately 36,400 U.S. troops stationed in Germany amid renewed political tensions with Berlin. There are 6 military bases, but 40 installations. Okay. Ammo dumps, hospitals, combat outposts. Okay, so you have a lot of military personnel there. You have the hospitals, you have all these other outposts and that sort of thing. So that's probably where I got it from. 100,000 is still a big exaggeration. It's kind of like when, I'll just say it. I have a hard time sometimes saying my opinion because, you'll know when I say it right now. with Iran, right? Iran in January, they had the protester massacres. And the number was, how many people were massacred. This is not a funny, subject matter. It's just interesting and somewhat funny in the way that is communicated by those that are trying to communicate the situation, right? So, so you have, some people out in the media saying there were 30,000 people that were dead, that were killed. This is what they started off with. And then you have the previous Shah's son, the prince guy or whatever. And then in one of the clips that I saw, he was saying 40,000 people. And then I saw like a Pierce Morgan clip or whatever, and you saw like some other guy, and he was saying 50,000 people were dead. And I'm just like, you guys are just adding 10,000 every time you guys talk? Like, that's a lot of people. You guys are just... It's kind of like my 36,000 U.S. troops to 100,000 is kind of like that. It's like we're really just not taking into account that these are human beings that were killed. And maybe we should probably be more closer to the truth. Like maybe if we're going to go on national TV, we should probably speak of the actual number we actually believe it is. And then you have reports that the reports will say that it was like 6,000 or 7,000 or whatever. And then Iran would say that it was like close to 3,500 or something. Yeah. Anyways, that's kind of like where my mind went with that, where it's just like, okay. Anyways, so that's what my brain worked in the same capacity, I guess, as these people talking about a situation that literally just happened. You would think that they would at least all quote the number that was actually reported versus some random other number. They inflate numbers for propaganda purposes. Yeah, but I mean, like, at least be consistent. You know what I mean? Like, 30,000 was a big number. You know, like if you're trying to do propaganda, if you're trying to propagandize me, like 30,000 is a big number. Like, you won with that. Like, just continue to only say 30,000. Because, like, when then you have, like, the person that wants to take over the government saying 40,000, I mean, when you think about the fact that others have said 100,000, I think Trump said 100,000 at one point, and others have 60 or 50,000 or whatever, 40,000 is a conservative 10,000 increase of the previous number. But, yeah. Okay, let's continue. The rising tide of nationalism in the colonial territories was remarked by the shrewder operators of United States finance capital as America's opportunity to insinuate itself into what were the jealously guarded preserves of rival imperialism. Anti-imperialist stirring had begun to show themselves in Asia and Africa before the outbreak of the last World War. Oh, really? Interesting. This was anti-imperialism was starting to show up. But then, as hostiles progressed, America came out more and more openly for the ending of colonial rule. Good guys. Press and other public propaganda harked back to America's own fight against colonialism. The remembrance was linked into people's mind with the budding nationalist movements that were bringing overt pressure for independence around the globe. War-torn Europe would provide part of the answer to America's need to extort investment, capital, and goods. But territories newly released from the political power of rival imperialism would offer practically virgin fields. Wonderful. A fabulous growth in American monopoly capitalism occurred during the first 40 years of the present century. United States foreign investment vied with those of Europe, overtook and surpassed them. And now is basically, I think, now I saw somebody that was talking about like the grasp of world economy that America has is 26%, and it's been 26% since World War II. But I'm going to have to look that up because they're obviously their capitalist companies have infiltrated Africa to such a great deal. I just wonder if how they're calculating this. But it also does say that the other European countries have actually lost market share of the world's economy because America has been taking it. So I'm just wondering how this actually works. I'm going to try to research a little bit more about that because I don't 100% understand it. Okay, so United States foreign investment vied with those of Europe, overtook and surpassed them. In the 1900s or 1900, American private foreign investments were small by comparison, and Europe's 500 million to Britain's 12,000 million and France's 600 million. By 1930s, the growth rates of Americans' foreign investment had already overlapped those of Britain, standing at 17 million against the latter's 19,000 million, and way ahead of France's 7,000. You see the numbers. America's foreign investment position was supreme by 1949 at 19,000 million against Britain's 12,000 million, the level at which it had opened the century. France's level had sunk to 2,000 million. The First World War eliminated Germany's foreign investment and reduced those of France. The Second World War eliminated Germany, Italy, and Japan. The American government, moreover, had added 14,000 million to its monopolies, 19,000 million of private foreign investment. The government loans are political loans rather than direct profit-making investment. But they enhance the position of the United States finance capital by providing markets for surplus goods and by increasing profits of private American investors in the borrowing countries. Okay. All right. I wonder if that has something to do with the numbers. So I'm gonna do some research there, because it's not direct. A government intervention is these capitalist companies. So I just wonder if that's where the difference is. The Second World War gave explosive momentum to American capitalism and helped it to increase its overseas investments and exports of manufactured goods to the colonial preserves of European and Japanese imperialism. In the decade 1938 to 1948, Americans' share of the imports into these territories rose from 11% to 25%. Her African trade in the period went from 150 million to 1,200 million. Jesus. At which figure it represents almost 15% of all of Africa's foreign trade. It goes to one country. American monopoly's appetite was weathered by the income 18,000 million by which it had profited from its foreign investment in the period 1920 to 1948. The prospects in 1948 looked even richer and proved so between 1950 and 1959. Between American firms invested 4,500 million in the development countries and made 3 times as much. Net profits came to 8,300 million, which can be and other ancillary operations. Best viewers, okay. All of this was helped along by Marshall Aid, born out of the marriage between American state and monopoly. The dollar was brandized as the universal cure me quick for Europe, bringing fat super profits to its American owners. In the confusion and devastation left by war, they were to slip unobtrusively into the cozy corners from which the European imperialists would be edged out both from Europe and its territories overseas. American financial and industrial capital used the opportunity which Europe's post-war weakness offered to draw upon its resources. It fed on war-ruined Europe through not to the same degree as Western imperialism exploited the colonial and semi-colonial world. The powerful German metallurgical, and chemical trust, Verenigd, whatever, and IG Farben were broken down. The West German state, established in 1949, came under a military occupation that controlled its foreign trade, its foreign policy, and defense. Of the factories which had escaped wartime destruction, some were dismantled. Many of Germany's best scientists and technicians were lured to America and Britain. The secrets and patents of the large trusts were appropriated. The archives of the most important bank, the Deutsche Bank, turned over to the occupying forces by Dr. Hermann J. Abs, Hitler's despoiler of Yugoslavia, who was saved from the death to which he was condemned first by the British and then by the American military authorities. Germany was being made safe for the democracy of its imperialist conquerors. The Marshall Plan was used to push American imperialist penetrations into the fragmented German industry and financial institutions into which it brought heavily. Large sums were also handed out to French and Belgian mining concerns in order to tighten the links with American capitalists and support its domination. Metallurgical. Sorry, I don't think I'm gonna get it. But anyways, I wanted to say something about the things that we've read so far. We basically have learned how America came to save the colonial world from colonization and free them and bring them to neocolonialism. You think it's funny how we all know colonial, the word colonialism, we all know imperialism. We are so indoctrinated to see those things as bad things that these European countries did, but none of us really hear about neocolonialism. I don't think we actually learned about neocolonialism at all in school. I'm pretty sure that this is the first time I'm learning about neocolonialism. You're laughing at me. I don't think I'm going to get that word. So I don't think that we learned. And this is why, right? Because even though America saved us, I'm being sarcastic, saved the world from colonialism after World War II, we never hear or talk about the fact that things are actually worse, compared to what they were. In the words of an African leader that liberated his country and had to deal with this stuff in 1945, and things are worse now. So, it's funny how we don't learn about the things that are happening now, and we don't get to see it for what it really is. We only get to see the poor African kids with flies on their nose or whatever. All right, I'm going to take a break, and we're going to go into another Instagram. Okay, let's see what. Okay, we just saw her. Okay, let's see what this is about. I haven't seen it.
We are at the courthouse in Isiolo in eastern Kenya, where we're covering a story about environmental injustice. We have been here with more than 200 petitioners who have come to court saying that a multinational called Amoco back in the 80s came to drill for oil in their neighborhood, but then when they left...
Look at how beautiful. I love it. The outfits.
left, then they left a trail of devastation. They say that they got all these health implications, including cancer. Their water was polluted as well. So they are suing British Petroleum. The company bought Amoco back in the 90s. And we have heard from their lawyers who
Wow.
say that they were not given enough notice to start this case. This is where the drilling sites were in Chalbi Desert, and you can still see markings of what was happening. It's written Amoco here, Amoco Kenya. Amoco is the U.S. company that was conducting this drilling operation. We have been speaking to residents here who say that it was not just the drilling that was happening, but they believe that workers were dumping toxic waste, which has devastated their life to date. In the year 2000, there was a borehole here. People would come to fetch water and water their livestock. But in one day, 7,000 livestock, including birds, lost their lives, apparently, after drinking water here.
What?
It's not clear why or what happened, but government officials came here, they condemned the place, they sealed it.
Mbuzi kama saa moja hivi mchana asubuhi ndio nakuja maji. Mpaka saa tatu mbuzi inaanza kufa. Mbuzi inaanza kufa yangu ile mimi nachunga. Mimi kondani. Ile mbuzi kama nataka kunywa maji, nataka kuhama tena kurudi nyuma, saa ile inaanza kufa.
I would call it an environmental genocide, looking at the number of people that we've lost and the documented cases of people deceased as a result of cancer.
Nagofe, abalmeli, aniye, agelgara, anondegidelda, selgal nayo, nago idase, agelgadile.
Yeah. So that's something that is still happening today. And the struggles that these people have to still go through, and all of the diseases and the deaths. One thing that I noticed from that, and this is just my own observation from my own perspective, is how they said that the livestock lost their lives. I get a little tiny bit emotional because it's just a different way. Like, just by them stating it that way, you can see the different level of respect that they have for livestock and just animals in general and living things in general, compared to, these companies that come and basically murder the land and the people of the land. So that kind of got me a little bit, because that's part of the thing that we lose when we accept this this neocolonial, this system, this imperialistic, Western, capitalistic. I mean, there's so many names for it, but when we allow our education systems, we allow our societies to basically forget our culture, our language, our clothing, our style, our religion, our dances, and all those things that I think is so important. So I might mention it several times, because it's part of the thing that I think is lost, along with lives, and the things that last longer than lives, actually. So those are the things that we lose. I'm going to just read what you said before. The Boondocks. I've watched several episodes of the Boondocks, but I I didn't learn about neocolonialism. I didn't see those episodes. If the 7,000 livestock that died were cows, that's a value of 35 million at 5,000 a herd. Yeah, their whole livelihood. I mean, you saw that guy, he lost a bunch of goats. I think he said like 200 or something like that. What can you do? Okay, let's go back. Okay. An eye also had to be kept on the socialism that was advancing in Europe and Asia. Before the opening of the 1950s, the Cold War began to heat up. Interesting. It was felt that the threat of heavy German competition, which had inspired the limitations put upon it by the victorious imperialism, could be cushioned by drawing Germany into Western strategy and by greater participations from the United States capital. Germany's position in the, oh wow, is this the same word? Metallurgical and chemical field began to change as that country was drawn into the overall pattern of Western defense. More energetic exploration for metal and mineral resources was undertaken in Africa and elsewhere. Africa's raw materials are an important consideration in the military built-up of the NATO countries, in which all included those of the European Common Market. Their industries, especially the strategic and nuclear factories, depend largely upon the primary material that come from the less developed countries. Post-war Europe sustained a precarious shortage of basic supplies for its steel manufacturers. Belgium needed more rich ores, Sweden more coal and coke, which Americans supplied in return for fine ores. Britain lacked pig iron and scrap. Her coke was short and inferior. Both France and Germany had fallen behind in coke supplies. They keep talking about coke. Are they talking about coke? Okay. Production of Lorraine coal was declining because of lack of equipment. German coal became, because of Ruhr, was producing less. Investment in industries with a high value production, that is, the mineral transformation and heavy industries, while providing the opportunity to influence the European economists and hence their policies toward United States ideological domination, did not give the same scope for the quicker and larger profits that production of primary products in the emergent countries offered. Okay, so they were kind of forced into these business arrangements with the United States. That's funny that they get to be taken into these less ideal negotiated deals, kind of what they were doing or were also doing to Africa. Can we have you doing that? Replace every word you struggle with. Yeah, I can probably do that. That to replace. Oh, okay, I see. Can we have you doing that to replace every word you struggle with? What that? Can we have you replace what with every word you struggle with? What is it that you're saying? What am I supposed to replace it? Are you talking about that other word? Or, that sound that I make sometimes. What are you saying? All right, let's continue. The .4 program supported the Marshall Planners in, let's see, you did a little, oh, yes, yeah. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I could. I will, though, just for my own sake, attempt the word a couple of times. But after a certain point, I might just do the because there's words that I just can't get. Yeah. Okay. The Ch.4 program supported the Marshall Planners in opening up Africa to the United States capital and its European associates. Before the Second World War, only 3% of America's foreign investments were in Africa, and less than 5% of the continent's trade was the United States. Firestone interests in Liberian rubber and small participation in South African and Rhodesian mines accounted for most of the 200 million invested in Africa. So what took most of it? It was rubber and mines. Yeah, well, that is what it has most of now as well, along with the services industry. As the war pushed into, actually, you said something. I know I'm just. As the war pushed into this continent, military bases and trade connections were established by the Americans, from which they pursued their greater penetrations after the end. At least I don't laugh after penetrations anymore. And I've used it in my own notes as well. So after the end of the war, ECA Marshall Plan funds finance American exploration groups sent in the best colonial tradition to prepare the way for mining companies and military expeditions. It was announced by ECA in July 1949 that American experts with Marshall Plan aid are probing Africa from the Atlas Mountains to the Cape of Good Hope for agricultural and mineral wealth. And later on that, opportunistic for American capital participation were disclosed in French North African lead mining, French Cameroon tin mining, French Congo lead zinc mining, an ECA loan to Mines de Zelidia, a French concern under the aegis of the Paneroya Company, the fourth largest lead and zinc producer in the world, enabled Newmont Mining Corporation, an American mining and crude oil concern with 30% of its interests in South Africa and Canada, to buy into the company and manage its operations. Europe's post-war instability was turned to United States account in the new division of Africa. In the fall of 1949, after America had forced currency devaluation upon the European countries, a committee of leading British and American bankers was formed to push U.S. investments in Africa and other parts of the still remaining British Empire. A similar committee with similar purposes was established 2 months later between American bankers and those of France. The hand of these establishments is seen today all over Africa in the consortia that are fast laying a grip on the continent's riches. Rockefellers, Morgan, Kuhn, Loeb, and Dillon Reed institutions, the big British banks, Barclays, Lloyds, Westminster Provincial, the investment houses pivoted around Hambros, Rothschild, Philip Hill, the French banks Banque de Paris et des Pays Bas, Banque de l'Union Parisienne, Banque de l'Indochine, Union Européenne, Industrial, Banque Worms, Credit Lyonnais, Lazard Freres, etc., and the leading German and Italian banks. So basically, all of these people are now invested in Africa, and many of them have relationships or they have had negotiations with American, whether or not they are American or not. Mainly, the ones mentioned here was Africa with French and the British. These and their associates are the financial institutions that dominate the monetary and fiscal sectors of many of the newly independent states. Do you think that they're still the ones to today? Or do you think that we've had any changes? Let's see. I'll do some research. They support the new industrial revolution of automation, electronics, and nuclear and space development, in which America plays the lead and which has swept U.S. imperialism to its present ascendancy. American groups dominant in the mining and ore processing and finishing industries are involved directly or through their bankers and financing houses in ventures with leading European producers and their financial backers. The finance capitalists who control the leading corporations in the extractive. I think I'm going to have to learn this word. Metallurgical. There we go, metallurgical. I think I got it. Chemical, nuclear, and space industries of the West are to be seen stretching out across the 7 seas and taking command of the source of primary materials in Asia, Oceania, Australia, New Zealand, Central and South America, and Africa. U.S. investment in Canada in 1962 went up by nearly $700 million, mostly for developing iron ore properties. An additional $207 million invested in other developed countries went mainly to Australia and Japan. You know, as I'm reading all of these numbers, and I wonder, this is probably why a lot of people, a lot of political commentary and analysts really hate the president's isolation strategies, I guess. America first is the idea now, right? But you have all of these, I guess, neocons is what they call them, who have been really into this neocolonialism. Okay, now I can see the tie-in together with those two. But yes, you see these people always speaking out against what he's doing. And honestly, now that I'm looking at and seeing the details, I can see why they would do that, because we have just been making just an amazing amount of money in all of these different countries, basically taken up investment in their own countries in Europe, not just Africa. So to be like, we don't want to do any more deals with you guys, it's a weird thing to say. And I just wonder, like, how does that even work when so much American investment is already with those different countries? Anyway, yeah. So I can see why everybody hates, this idea that we don't want to do business with other countries because we just want to kind of isolate ourselves because we're so powerful. We don't want, we don't want to be the ones that pay the most to NATO or whatever the case may be. But now when you look at the numbers in 1965, which you could only imagine has grown astronomically, and we already know that for these other countries, their share of the world's capital has decreased for these other European countries because of war and losing, or even how much they put into it, that they have less. And the reason that they have less is because America has taken up more. And therefore, that is why we pay more to NATO. And we already know NATO is not necessarily a force of good. It's just kind of like that is their the face they put on before they go out, but internally we all know that it's still just another system. It's a system to prop up in imperialism. So I guess that's what you get when you get a dumb president. I guess part of me is grateful that he's president from that stance, is he's allowing us to expose all this stuff instead of continue to just be pacified by the crumbs, like Kwame said earlier, what they do with their own society. They just pacify us with the crumbs while they're getting, wealthier and wealthier. So at least with Trump, we get to feel some pain, which makes us wake up a little bit. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's just, to me, it's just funny how like we have been making so much money out of these other European countries. We're basically doing to them what they've been doing to their colonies. Okay, the finance capitalists who control the leading corporations in the extractive. We already read that, but I only know we already read that because we come to the word I hate saying, metallurgical, whatever. I'm just going to skip it. I already read that, and I read it good earlier, so we can skip it. The U.S. Department of Commerce reported that private American investment and assets overseas reached $60,000 million at the end of 1962 and advanced a further $3,000 million in the first 6 months of 1963. Private investors in the United States added $4,300 million in 1962 to their holding of assets and investment. Yeah, these numbers don't mean much, to be honest. Now that we are in 2026, this stuff has blown up. So I might just skip some of this. Direct private American investment increase between investment, including reinvestments, surpluses being estimated. I'm going to skip some of this stuff because honestly, all of these numbers have changed astronomically, and we already kind of know the end of the story. It allowance and made grants for non-military purposes, estimated by the U.S. Congress. Yeah. Okay. So we see that Africa has some net losses. Let's read from there. Africa's net total losses still reach $419 million. Official American statistics put the gross profits made by U.S. monopolies in Africa between 1946 and 59 at $1,234 million, though other estimates place it at 1,500. Whichever way they are looking at it requires no great mathematical mind to make out from these figures the almost 100% profitability on investment in Africa. And you have to think that every time you have an external company or country coming into your country to provide roads, to provide services, to mine your resources or whatever the case may be, your people are being robbed. They're not getting paid enough. You have to pay for these things, so you have to ask for loans, and they're predatory. So you're just never going to get out of your situation. Okay. The avid exploration that have gone on space in the last 2 or 3 decades for additional reserves of all the metals and minerals that are imported for modern industrial supremacy have been instigated by the drive for monopoly, upon which supremacy and its super profits rest. A recent example makes the principle clear. Alcan Industries, a British associate of Alco, Aluminium Company of America, through Alcan Aluminium of Canada, according to a Sunday Times headline in 1964, wrapped up the last of the foil. That's it. That is, Alcan Industry paid $6 million to take over the last independent firm in British aluminum foil making, having already swallowed most of the rest. This was done, it is said, to bring about rationalization, but in boardroom talk, it has another meaning: sewing up the industry. Okay. So what did we learn from that? That last paragraph. Who did that? The last 2 or 3 decades for additional reserves imported for modern industry supremacy. Is this America? Or American and British bought the last independent? Okay. All right, just additional bad news. Okay, part of the objective of gaining control of industries and newfound raw material sources is to deprive rivals of their use. That's interesting. That is one of the things that has to do with war and power, right? In a war, you want to make sure that you have the materials that the other country, your enemy, needs, so that they don't have what they need to produce the equipment or even to feed or whatever their population. So you just basically take it over so that you can have control over it. The manipulation of artificial scarcity is another of monopoly's tactics for maintaining profits. For 3 years until mid-1964, the big copper companies were running production at between 80 to 85% of capacity to keep up prices. Steel production, too, was held back to something like 80% of capacity. They do this with OPEC, and that's part of the reason that Saudi Arabia got out of OPEC, so that they can sell it at whatever price that they want to, and they can produce more than the limits of that the cartel, basically indicates. So they create these basically cartels so that they can control the prices, the capacity. They can make more money. Extortion, basically. Exploitation under imperialism does not, nor will, always follow upon the finding of new sources of raw materials. Whoever monopolizes the major sources of supply controls output by having the decisive voice in what deposits shall or shall not be worked and to what degree. This is probably where this oil war is all about as well. Monopoly allows the monopolists to manipulate the economies of other countries in their interests. In the case of bauxite, for instance, Melem-dominated Alcoa is sovereign and has drawn into its orbit the other major producers, Kaiser and Reynolds. Because of the tremendous cost of building power plants upon which the conversion of bauxite into alumina depends, the exploitation of all known reserves of this ore by private capital would defeat the prime incentive of monopoly, profit. For the superabundant productions that would result would depress prices. West Africa is exceptionally rich in bauxite, but the individual countries are not equally favored with the power to develop resources. Ghana is providing hydroelectric power which could be used to convert alumina in both Ghana and Guinea. This would be a welcome cooperation effort within the framework of a united continental economy. Another weapon that is held over the heads of the primary producing countries is the threat of using systemic alternatives and the replacement of traditional metals by others. Synthetic diamond plants have been established by De Beers, the world's monopolist in natural diamonds, by the Belgian company Miba, which controls Congo's natural diamonds, the largest supplier in Africa, by the General Electric Corporation in the US, and by Japan. The price of copper was held down by the main producers on the London metal market at the period of recession in its marketing because of the likely use of aluminum in its place for certain purposes, while plastics, on the other hand, are frequently proposed as the alternative to aluminum. Vast sums are expended in research for new materials and in scientific invention of labor-saving machinery and equipment. Thus, metals that are being threatened with substitution are at the same time being developed for a wider variety of finished goods. Such research projects the resultant re-equipment of factories and industries, which must be done in the original investment, if the original investment is to be justified. Calls for tremendous capital sums, which frequently can only be met from the assets of financial and insurance establishments. Consequently, banks and insurance companies dominate industrial finance and exercise a leading role in the push for monopolist ascendancy. The banks and insurance companies have been foremost in the process that has brought monopoly to its present peak. And it is their financial power that supports the increasing movements towards greater and greater concentration of monopoly. So basically, if you don't, fulfill your agreement to the degree that they want, if you threaten to back away, or if you threaten to change things, then you yourself as an African nation, or the nation that provides the raw materials, are threatened with substitutes. So we will just not buy from you. We'll just make something else. We'll substitute with something else, and then you're going to be devastated. And then at the same time, they will expand the use of the raw material that you have. So it's really just a trick. I mean, to be honest, Africa needs to, like the lady said, needs to widen up, needs to kind of wake up, needs to get smart, needs to understand that this is the same playbook, and that you don't need to agree to these terms. You agree to terms with your partner, with your African countries. We need to get to that point. And I just don't understand why they haven't up to this point. I mean, I do based on everything we've read, but there's going to be some hard times, there's going to be, it's very easy for me to say, to be honest with you, with all of the assassinations of their leaders, and even with the ones that are trying to do it now, but more of them need to take the risk. And they all need to do it at the same time. And they need to help each other and get out of this mess. And yes, there's going to be a point where there's going to be war. That's going to be very, very direct and intentional. Because like we read already, the imperialist system is basically on a survival mode. This is how they treat socialism. This is how they treat communism. They do the propaganda, but they do the wars. They do whatever they have to do to keep it from spreading. And if they can kill it, they will also kill it. So if Africa decides to step out to get their economy, their people, their resources out of the imperialist world, we already know it's going to be some shit that's going to go down. It's not going to just happen easily. And we see that even in the 3 countries that are trying to unite in West Africa right now. We already see the pushback from France. We see the murder attempts, the assassination attempts. We see it happening there because they are on a survival mode. Like, they're going to do whatever they can. And if more of them decide to do that, then it's going to be straightforward. Right now, it's still like they're still using the neocolonialist systems where they implant, they train the military, they produce the weapons. But eventually, if more and more of them decide to not accept these contracts, to make them pay taxes if they're going to do business in their countries, to have better terms, and to do business with each other, there's going to be direct war with the Western countries. And I think Africa needs to get smart and do the things that they're not expected to do. You unite, but you have to also be building your weapons at the same time at whatever stage you are. And that's going to be probably the reason that they're going to use to start the war. But they need to do that because either way, whether they prepare or they don't prepare, war is coming because this is a survival mode system. Anyways, that is, of course, my opinion, but based on everything that I've read up to this point and what I've seen. Okay, let's watch another video. Oh, wait, no, we're almost, we can watch one more video because we're almost done. Let's make a little note here. We left off here. And let's watch another, they never follow, though, on those threats. There are no sustainable substitutes or obvious where they get it for the same value of plunder. Of course. And he said it there as well, right? Like they can never follow through on the threats, but they will threaten. That's part of what we're talking about. Like Africa needs to kind of like widen up. You need to wake up. It's the same system. It's the same lies. They're not. Nothing is changing. All right, let's watch another, and then I think we're done.
Whether it's the IMF demanding austerity, the World Bank demanding privatization, or China demanding the cancellation of a conference, the mechanism is the same. Debt gives foreign powers the right to make decisions that belong to African people. Last week, Zambia canceled the world's largest digital rights conference because China, its largest creditor, said so. 2,600 people, 150 countries gone because of a debt. In 2021, Namibia took an emergency IMF loan worth about $270 million to survive COVID. Over 5 years, they paid it down with discipline. On April 15th, 2026, they made the final payment. And just weeks before that, Mozambique cleared $701 million in IMF debt. 2 African nations, 2 zero balances, a quiet but powerful shift. The IMF and World Bank were created in 1944 by the US and the UK before most African nations existed. The US holds a permanent veto. Standard IMF programs come with conditions, and conditions shape policy. Policy written in Washington doesn't serve the people of Kinshasa, Nairobi, or Lagos. The IMF's own former chief economist said that the conditions systematically damaged developing countries. This isn't a system that failed Africa. It's a system that was never built for Africa. Right now, Egypt owes the IMF more than $7 billion, the highest on the continent, tied to programs with reform conditions attached. Nigeria carries a crushing debt load to China and the World Bank that functions the same way. Africa's total external debt has reached $1.2 trillion, 42% owed to private creditors lending at higher rates with less transparency. Today, 32 African nations are spending more on debt repayments than on health care for their own people. And it's not a coincidence. It's a system working exactly as designed. African governments must build domestic revenue systems that work, invest in intra-African trade, stop borrowing at commercial rates to fund recurrent spending, and diversify economies so that when commodity prices drop, the entire country doesn't collapse with them. Africa isn't poor. Africa is being kept poor. Namibia and Mozambique just chose differently. The rest need to decide. And if you didn't know, now you know. Whether it's the...
All right. Sorry, I think it froze again, but I think you heard everything. This was another good person to follow. So if you want to take a look, Chanello Liver 1 is her name. And let's go back to Charmaine's posts. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, so these two ladies are really good to follow. They have the other one has a lot of solution. This lady has a lot of information about what is happening. But yes, so they both touched on a lot of what we've read today. Yeah. All right. Well, that is it for today. Thank you for coming back. And I will see you tomorrow, same time. And I'm going to have the notes for the notes that we went over. I'm going to post those in like a few minutes in the Discord. And you can find my Discord by just going to the my profile and then clicking on the link there. So, all right, see you tomorrow.